everyone, and welcome to Book Review of the Vampire, episode something. And we are on The Vampire Lestat, the first 8 chapters of Ancient Magic, Ancient Mysteries. Woo! And joining me as always is my companion in literary lunacy, Leonora.
Hello, guys.
There she is. Yeah, so we turn once again to review part of The Vampire Lestat, the second book in the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles. And good evening to those of you who have decided to join us this evening on the 1st of October, the beginning of spooky season, which is appropriate for us talking about vampires and things. Random American, good evening. No Asensio, good evening. Ostsan, good evening. And for those of you who are either lurking or in the future, good evening. Also, before I get too far into things, if you'll take a look at the top of the chat box, got some fundraisers up there for our friends Maddie, Lisa, and Angry Illinois. And if you can take a look at those, please do. If you can donate, great. If you can't, that's fine. But if you can, share those out on social media. It would be appreciated. So, finally,
Yes.
Lestat has found his Marius.
Yes. Finally.
And finally, yes, he fell unconscious into Marius's arms in a burnt-out house in wherever he was, Egypt or whatever. And then suddenly he wakes and he finds himself, I'm on a boat. I'm on a boat. Everybody look at me because I'm sailing on a boat. Yeah, so I can't really, I don't feel like I can talk about this in detail so much as Marius is apparently a James Bond supervillain with his own island fortress.
Mm-hmm.
With every collectible under the sun.
Yes.
And I'm curious to know what you think, but I would say that so far, once we get into the second half of our little our selection here, Marius has the most interesting origin story of any of the characters.
Yes.
I may be slightly biased, but I think he has the best so far, but we'll get to it. So what do we learn in the first couple of chapters as Lestat is sailing on a boat?
Well, basically everything we wanted to know about, the ones, what's the phrase they use, the ones that must be kept.
Yes, the ones that must be kept. Yes, this was mentioned earlier in things that there was this rumored creatures or something or items, who knows, it's called the ones that must be kept.
We find a different type of guide, let's say, for Lestat. Like, I think that he, like, Marius is truly, like, willing to show him everything and quickly, let's say.
Yes, like in one night, like everything all of a sudden. It's like, Here you go, waste no time, let me tell you everything right now. I mean, this is the same problem we had with Armand. It's like, oh, Armand, tell us of your secrets. It's like, here's my life story in 10 minutes. Okay, I'm done with you, bye.
Yeah, it's but Armand was not even, like, interesting at all,
No, he wasn't. Whereas Marius is like man of the world. He's like, he is what Lestat wants to be.
Yes.
He is the atheist, pragmatist, intellectual, philosopher, man of the world, maintained his reason and rationale throughout the ages and so on and so forth. He's basically just Lestat's ideal sense of himself, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting part is that when Lestat wakes up on the boat, Marius is there up at the captain's wheel, and he's captaining the ship through the seas and everything. And they're off somewhere in the Mediterranean or something. I don't know if they got quite specific with where they were, but as they're passing all these islands, he sees little lights and little fires on these islands, and people would see him and stand at like respect, like they knew what he was or had some idea of his importance. And he's up there with his long blonde hair and his chiseled features, and he takes Lestat on his arm and says, it's just like, oh my God. it's like, I mean, it's half reading like a romance novel almost.
Yes,
there's the big, long-haired Fabio sea captain, like, yes, come here, my dear, join me on the deck as I pilot the ship through the waters.
Yes, totally.
And so
it's a passage of those cheesy, like, romantic novels.
Yeah, and again, I start having a hard time taking it seriously because it's just so idealized. And so Lestat joins Marius as they get to his island fortress where he has, like I said, just imagine a James Bond villain hideout with like works of art and amazing things and tapestries from ancient times and goblets and gidgets and gadgets and all types of crazy stuff just littering all over the place. And
the enormous library.
Of course. Oh, yes, of course. We have to have the gigantic library, just like, Alexandria, but just slightly lesser, just all over the place, books and scrolls and ancient tomes and things written in languages that Lestat can't read, and on and on and on and on and on. And then Marius is like, so, you want to see the really good stuff? I'm like, Lestat's yeah.
Yes.
Okay, little boy, come with me to the basement. And so he's like, here are the ones who must be kept. And he shows them. And this is a scene that is effectively, more or less, recreated in the Queen of the Damned movie.
Yes,
which combines
exactly.
which combines elements from Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned. And he's taken to this vast chamber where you have, by all rights, two statues, marble-looking statues of a man and a woman sitting on little thrones at the end of this great chamber. And but they are, as far as Marius knows, the oldest vampires in existence. Perhaps they are the first vampires. He can't say for sure. And he talks about how, they've never spoken to him. He knows that they're there. He catches them sometimes having moved, but never sees them move. He used to bring them sacrifices and would just like leave them in the chamber with them. And eventually he'd come back and they'd be sucked dry and all this kind of thing. And they're just, they look like they are stone. This is what happens to ancient vampires when they age and so on. So he knows that they're there, but they've never really acknowledged him directly, and he's sort of their keeper. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we find out how he came to be their caretaker in the section. But as soon as Lestat walks in the room, I mean, because of course, because Lestat is there. As soon as that happens, there's a change in the room. There's the air seems to thicken slightly, and something is coming from the female of the Marius doesn't even know their names. He just knows that they are the ones who must be kept. And Lestat's like goes up to her. He looks at Marius and says, May I touch her? He's like, of course, go ahead. And he goes up and he starts sniffing at her or something. And then suddenly a name comes to him, Akasha. And Marius is like, you son of a bitch.
Exactly.
You'd like, I just imagining in my mind, I was thinking Marius is looking at these two going like, I do everything for you and I bring in this twerp and suddenly now you're going to open up to him? Like, what?
Totally.
Wait, what am I, chopped liver? Like, yes. Damn it.
Yes, that was the most unfair thing ever.
I mean, you want to talk about like the most epic friend zone ever in the history of histories? It's Marius and the ones who must be kept, or at least Akasha.
Yeah.
And so, Lestat has this ET phone home connection moment with Akasha out of the blue. Just after, like, there's no lead. It's not like this.
Her.
What now?
He even kisses her.
Oh yeah, no. He cops the feel. He gets all touchy feely and everything with her, and Marius is just like, well, what am I going to do? Tell him no? They'll. I mean, if this is what she wants, I'm not in a position to tell her no. They'll, like, murder
Yeah.
me or something. They're the most powerful creatures on the planet. And like I say, it's not like this happens over the course of nights or weeks or months of him interacting with. It's just as soon as he walks in the room, they're like, oh yes, Lestat, my lovely, lovely boy.
Yeah.
And so she starts. I don't think she moves in a way, so to speak, but it's obvious that she is aware of Lestat's presence, is acknowledging it, and in fact communicating with him. And Marius can tell because he's got psychic powers too.
Mm-hmm.
And so Marius is like, okay, well, I guess that's enough for one night. And I'm just like, boy, you really blew your load in one go, didn't you, Marius? Just like, here's all my stuff, here's my library, here's your new girlfriend. I'll just go in the corner now and live my immortality elsewhere. And and then after that hilarious little debacle, we get into the origin story of Marius, which again is well, okay, that's not to say that Lestat's origin story or his revised origin story since the first book hasn't been interesting, I suppose, to a certain extent. I mean, at least in the beginning, Lestat wasn't entirely a Mary Sue. He had to work for his supper, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But as soon as he became a vampire, it was like, okay, there's nothing to worry about. He's got unlimited funds and so on. Marius kind of starts there in the sense that he is his mother was a Celt, mm-hmm. and his father was a Roman.
Yes.
And he's inherited a Roman senator. And he has inherited many of the physical traits of his mother's line in that he is tall and blonde and very stately looking, which is not common among the populace at that time. So he's in Rome, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. And he's at a bar, and we find out that he's a scholar and a philosopher, and he's a historian, and he has unlimited funds because, of course, he does. I'd really love to run into, and maybe we'll find it at some point. I'd love to run into like an absolute homeless vampire, like an absolute just pauper.
Yeah, we want someone that's poor.
I want somebody who actually has to struggle a little bit and think about the basics of existence beyond just my next victim. Like, where am I going to find shelter tonight? How do I find clothes so I don't look like a complete, idiot when I walk into a place trying. I mean, that was just as an aside, that was always the part of playing, well, just about any role-playing game, but specifically Vampire the Masquerade. I hated playing characters that had no struggle, that had nothing to overcome, because that's boring. There's nothing to do. So whenever I remember I played one character for like 5 years. And by the time I got done with playing this character every weekend for 5 years, the character was pretty powerful. Like, he had everything. There was really nothing that was disallowed from. The only thing I had to worry about was whether or not somebody else was scheming to get me or something. But as far as like, does he have a house? Does he have a set place that he can go to find food and all that other kind of stuff? That was all taken care of. And so when I had the opportunity to retire that character, I had a whole bunch of built up experience points I could have used to make just an Uber character. And I was like, no, I'm going to make somebody who lives out of a van, has no friends, has no money, starts out at the ground floor again, because working your way up is the story. Overcoming the obstacles makes the character. It helps you develop the character actively. And so when I find characters like this that are like, oh, I already have all the money and I've got slaves over here and I have attendants and I've got this big mansion that I live in, I was like, okay. But at least briefly, Marius is taken out of that. He runs into another Celt-looking individual like himself at this tavern that he's sitting at while he's writing down his history of whatever in Latin. And this Celt guy is really interested in him. It's like, it starts asking questions like, oh, where do you come from? Do you come here often? Do you like boys? That kind of thing. Like, can I buy you a drink? And Marius, being this very curious sort and very sociable, engages with this guy whose name, I don't think we ever learn the name of the guy he meets in the tavern.
No.
Yeah, we learn the name of the guy that is assigned to him later, but I don't think we ever learn his. Anyway, this guy becomes very, very interested in Marius. Seems to know more about Marius than makes any sense for just having run into a guy in a tavern. And starts quizzing him about his background, about his, what's he writing about, who is he, what does he do? And Marius is entertained. He's like, oh, this is an interesting fellow, maybe. Perhaps getting a bit too intimate in questions and things and so on. And then the guy's like, oh, well, you were chosen. And like, excuse me? It's like, yes,
Yeah.
we've been watching you for some time. Like, okay. Now, this is the one part that I didn't quite get. It's like, okay, in the middle of a tavern that this Marius guy is obviously, I assume, has been to because he's in his home turf.
Mm-hmm.
And he is effective, as far as I can tell, he would effectively be part of the aristocracy of this place. And yet somehow he's approached by a stranger, and then he is then, without knowing, bonked on the back of the head, knocked out, and dragged out of there. And nobody does anything to stop him. I mean, I realize Rome wasn't exactly, or ancient Rome wasn't a wholly civilized situation necessarily from tavern to tavern, but all the same, I'm kind of like, that, what? Really? But yeah, so Marius gets knocked over the head, and the next thing he knows, he's tied up in a cart being pulled through a forest.
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, well, he's taken out of his comfort zone. He's been kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
Now he has to find out what's going to happen to him and how he's going to escape. And he's put under 24-hour guard with this priest / sycophant, whatever, named Mael, Mael, I think is how it's pronounced.
Yes.
And he learns that he is to be trained in order to become a god. And my favorite part of this entire sequence is Marius talking about his internal thoughts at this point, thinking, oh dear, I'm going to be sacrificed, aren't I? These guys are druids. This is the strange cultish people that Caesar wrote about in his books on the frontier. And he's like, am I... So what happens to me when I become a god? It's like, oh, well, you'll shed your mortal self and become one with all the things. And like, oh, no. But this is not going to happen until Samhain or Samhain, depending on how you pronounce it, because that's the night that the ceremony will take place. And this is apparently several months from the point at which he was kidnapped. And so, having nothing to do and no ability to escape, Marius just kind of goes along to get along, and over the course of these months is taught to speak their language, is taught their prayers and their chants and all this other stuff. And he slowly tries to get Mael to, sympathize with him, because fortunately he doesn't give into Stockholm syndrome. He's like, dude, let's get out of here. I will take you back to my mansion. We can drink French wine forever, and you can learn all types of stuff outside of this dirty old forest. And the guy's like, oh, I'd really like to, but you have to become a god. Like, oh, man. So this goes on, and he keeps thinking, like, what's going to happen to me? And he kind of loses himself and just kind of like, okay, I've got no choice, so I'll just play along. And then finally the time comes where he's like, I have to become a god. It's like, so exactly how does this work? Well, the current god is going to make you a god. So they wrap him up, they clean him and bathe him and everything and shave his face and get him all ready, because they have to make sure he looks how he should look, because that's how he's going to look forever. And they put him in a white robe and they lead him out into the forest, and there's this big tree with a door in it. I'm like, okay, we're going to give you to the god now. And they throw him in this tree, and somehow there's a little bit of light in there, and he sees this like burnt, desiccated mummy person thing sitting there with fangs in his mouth.
Yes.
And the guy's like, oh God, I'm so bored. I've been here forever. They won't let me go. I've got some kind of disease that's been rotting me away all this time. I'm going to make you a vampire. If you can get away, you better get away, because you'll never get away if you don't get away now, because I haven't gotten away. And I've been here for like 700 years. And they think that I help with the seasons and the crops and things, and they just keep me in this tree. And I'm like, wait a second. Lestat, his mother, who was just born literally yesterday, a couple of chapters ago, were doing physical, mental, and otherwise magical feats beyond human ken. And you're telling me that some vampire that's been locked in a stump for 300 years couldn't overpower a couple of Celtic guys outside the door?
Exactly.
What? Like, we gotta be, what the, this just, this is one of those things where it's like you establish rules in your universe and then you, with no explanation, shatter them.
Yeah, anyway, and the funny part is it's when he is like the mummy guy is like explaining to Marius like what is gonna happen, and he tells him, "You're gonna have all my strength and all my knowledge and all my," and I was like, well, probably it's not that much.
Yeah, great. You'll have the relative strength, speed, and agility of a slug. Like, what? Like, you'll just sit here in this stump forever. Like, okay, but no, he says, okay, so what I'm going to do is I have to make you into a god. It's the only way that I'm going to get any help, because I don't know what's going on with me. I've gotten like vampire rabies or something, and this is what's done to my skin. So now let me bite you. Like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Wait a second. So the diseased mummy vampire is now going to bite me and give me his blood. And this, but what you have to do is you have to go to Egypt. Somehow they've got the cure in Egypt. I don't know how I know they have a cure in Egypt. We don't explain to the reader how this character could possibly know there's a cure in Egypt for something that he caught sometime in the past while he was in the stump and couldn't possibly know what's going on in the outside world. But then, of course, Lestat can hear radio signals from underneath the ground over the course of the 80s or whatever, so who knows? Anyway, so he feeds... He drinks all the blood out of Marius and then feeds him back a bunch of blood, and then drinks all the blood out of Marius and feeds back. He does this like some endless dozen of times. He just drains Marius and feeds him back his own blood, and he's sort of marinating him in immortality. And then Marius is now a vampire, and he must be presented to the people. And he's like, you see, the Celts, they really adore their god, because they believe their god, when put into this tree, maintains the harvests and is also used as a judge for their disagreements and everything. A very centerpiece of the religion, let's say, of the cult. However, it is not a centerpiece that is allowed free will. The centerpiece must always stay there. So if the centerpiece tries to get away, no, we're going to lock our godling back in the tree again. So, and this is the other part that doesn't make any sense. It's Marius talks about how, if only I'd known then what my powers were. It's like, okay, Gabrielle became a killing machine in 10 minutes under Lestat, and you just had Mummy Man giving you a little bit of an education ahead of time, and you can't overpower a couple of Celtic guys arm wrestling you up to a stage to give proclamations and say prayers and make judgments. Okay, all right, whatever. But anyway, so he gets out there and he plays the part for a little bit, and he gets along to go along, doling out judgments and reading people's minds and stuff, which of course somehow he knows how to do that, but doesn't understand that he's stronger than 20 men at once. And then at the last second, he starts jumping through the treetops to escape.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
Leaving Mummy Man behind, probably being thrown into a fire. If I'm not mistaken, they threw Mummy Man into a fire because Mummy Man can't defend himself, even though he's like ancient. And And so he just hops from tree to tree to tree all the way back to Rome. He gets there in like a day, I think.
Yes.
He sleeps one night under the ground.
Okay.
He sleeps one night under the ground, and somehow the Celts, searching through the entire forest for their godling, don't detect him during the daytime hours that he's unconscious. But eventually he gets back to his mansion, and he's like, aha, I've arrived home, and he sees his slaves or his servants or whatever, and he's back in his mansion. And it's just like, okay, well, he had the most interesting backstory. Now we're back to, I have unlimited funds, I have superpowers, and now I'm going to just sail off to Egypt.
Yes.
And that's effectively where we end at the end of chapter 8.
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss anything as far as the chain of events?
No. No, I don't think so. It was like eight chapters full of information, if you want to put it like that. But like you said, some of the things like were like ridiculous, from Mario's even to a point like it seemed like willing, to be kidnapped and served to the gods and be killed and whatever, until Mummy Man, like, I am the most powerful being on earth, but I can leave this tree.
Yeah.
But you can. So it's just, yeah.
I was like, I mean, if they'd given some other kind of explanation, like if he'd said, or maybe this is in there and I just missed it. Maybe he was like, I've been this way for hundreds of years, and the disease that I have has weakened me to the point where I can't defend myself, and now I'm just basically a figurehead and I can't do anything. But yet my blood is still so powerful, you're going to be a superhuman as soon as I give it to you. I don't think I read that, but if that was the explanation, I'd be like, oh, okay. Well, see, and that's what I'm talking about. If you establish rules in your universe like this, and they're hard and they're fast, and this is how they work, you can introduce elements that break those rules as long as there's an explanation. So if there is some kind of curse or disease that specifically affects vampires that then weakens them to basically being husks, like Mummy Man, and then you say, if you said something like, the power is still in my blood, but I am cursed, I can no longer, I have no ability to defend myself or escape this place, but you do. If it was something like that, I'd be like, okay, as long as the disease is eventually given some kind of explanation or whatever. All right, you have an in-universe excuse and reason to depower an ancient vampire. Like, all right. Okay, but I didn't get that from this, just that he'd been withered, but he was still like super strong and still super durable. Maybe? Or maybe I'm supposed to assume something else? I don't know. But I didn't get that the disease did anything other than make him look like a burnt up, crispy critter. Unless
hopefully we get more information about that when he finally gets to Egypt, because it's where he has to go. Because remember, like the important points that this predecessor has to had was, is he like an educated man? Is he capable to go to Egypt? And I don't remember the third one, but they were like super specific. So yeah. We need to wait.
He had to be young, and he had to be intelligent and educated. Yeah, exactly. He had to have the means to go to Egypt and everything. I've been waiting for one like you for all this time and everything else. Like, well, you've been waiting for one like him. Then how many others have there? How does that even work? That means that they must have brought to you. I mean, maybe I missed something. Have the druids been bringing him potential godlings for years, and he just hasn't been? He's been very selective about who's going to get him? I didn't get that.
I don't like that.
So I don't. It was yeah. So the logic behind this was very confusing. The mechanics of, and I hate having to like I just did with saying, oh, maybe the disease weakened him and that's why he couldn't escape. I hate having to do the writer's work for them if I'm having to fill in that gap. Right? Yeah. Because because I could accept that. Like I say, I can accept an element that is rare and isn't often seen, depowering a character that, by all the other rules of the universe so far, should make that character effectively to these simple mortals an effective god. Okay, I could see that, but that wasn't explained, or at least it wasn't explained clearly to me in the chapters. So, but now, yeah, so now Marius, conceivably now, because he's been made by Mummy Man, Marius also, I guess, has this disease, and it will eventually overtake him unless he gets to Egypt. But if Mummy Man had any idea that he wasn't going to survive after New God was made, what exactly was the point? I mean, was he looking out for the rest of vampire kind by trying to have Marius go off and find a cure to this disease? And if there is a cure for this disease, and it's known to be a cure for this disease, then Mummy Man is an isolated case, and it's really not going to affect anybody else. So I don't know. There too many questions are created by this scenario. But like I say, Marius had the most interesting origin story so far. Not saying
and it's like, it's a pity, because I feel like Anne Rice tried to fit a lot of information in just like 8 chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I don't see the need for it, like she usually like takes her time and explains, and even over explains things. And this part was like super quick, and this and this and this happened, and then this and this, and and you have these holes that hopefully we get some answers later, but right now we have a lot of questions.
I think part of the problem is that Anne Rice had more ideas than
Paper.
Well, that could be contained within a reasonable novel length. I think that's the problem, is that I don't know that she knew where to cut off certain stories. Like Marius's story could be a book in and of itself, right?
Right.
I mean, with proper expansion from the basics. Like if you just took Marius's story, I could see plenty of places where you could tell his story from youth through to the point of the tavern, through everything else, to becoming like all these things could be novels in their own right. And obviously in some cases she eventually did do that, like the vampire Armand and things like that. But it feels like more and more that she's got too many ideas, and she's got too much backstory, and she's got too many characters that she really, really wants to tell us about, but she only has one novel to do it in. And so, like you say, in 8 chapters, we are just deluged with information. But I also look at, well, how many pages are left in this book? She's probably got a limit as to how long this book can be to still qualify for it being a novel. And so she's got to kind of rush to also get the plot out to us and explain where this character came from. When I'm like, I would be fine not knowing Marius's backstory. Like, I don't need to know Marius's backstory. So much could be implied by Lestat's tour of, Fortress Island. And I wouldn't need to know why Marius got there. But I guess she has to explain, how did Marius come into possession of the ones who must be kept? And I'm thinking to myself, that could be another book. That is a whole other story that is not going to be well told in the last 60 pages of this novel.
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, yeah, in the end, this part does not pushes forward the story at all.
No. And see, now, even though I'm an English major, I am not a professional writer or anything. I have attempted many times to write stories, so I can kind of understand the enthusiasm to want to explain things, right? Like I want to, as a writer, for my own use as much as anybody else's, I want to explain the backstory of this character or that character or something else. But again, like with Armand, now with like Marius, I'm thinking, like you say, you could take the stuff out and Anne Rice could put it on a shelf as reference material for when that becomes relevant in a future book. We don't really need to know it right now. I brought this example up several episodes now, but I think back to Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan the Barbarian, and how before he started writing the Conan stories, he mapped out essentially the entire world of the Hyborian age in which Conan would exist. And so that if Conan traveled to this country, he wouldn't have to think too hard about who is the king of this country and what language do they speak and what kind of environment is it. He would just have to think to himself, okay, I'm now going to tell a story of Conan going to this nation. And it would already be set. And if he did set a story later on and refer back to another country, there wouldn't be any conflicts because he already had the sort of world Bible established of all this stuff. And so, yeah, the entry on Armand's background, the entry on Marius's background, she could have just taken all that text, ripped it out of her manuscript, and compiled a character Bible on the side that she could either use as reference material for if characters are referred to in the future, or develop each one of those sections into their own novels. Yeah. Here, it seems, and here's a good $5 word for you, it seems superfluous. It seems unnecessary. It seems too much. And the way that we speed through it makes it almost comical and makes me kind of upset that it wasn't its own thing.
Yeah.
So that's my summary on that. And we're not even done with this section yet. We still have chapters 9 through 17 before we're done with the ancient magic, ancient mysteries. So before I, perhaps in Anne Rice vein, too hurriedly move along, anything else that comes to mind after reading this section?
No. I think that she created a lot of expectation. Mm-hmm. And then, like, you know, in the end, she just rushed everything and nothing, you know? I feel nothing.
I feel nothing.
I feel nothing.
I mean, Anne Rice had an amazing imagination. And she is definitely building a world through these characters bit by bit.
Yes.
But in a lot of ways, and we've mentioned this previous, I think, her at times her reach exceeds her grasp on keeping everything logical within the universe she's creating. Sometimes, oftentimes, it feels like she's making up too many things as she goes along, rather than stopping and saying, okay, I need to have a rule set. I need to have a pre-established reference, like just a checklist I have on the wall next to me as I'm writing. When I have a question about, okay, what can a vampire do? What can't a vampire do? I look to that reference sheet to make sure that before I write down the next part about this character, that I have an idea of what have I established previous, what is the rule, and how do I stick to it? Or if I am going to break it, it has to make sense to the setting. Yes. And time again, we keep encountering situations where, based on what she's told us previously, this doesn't make any sense. Based on what this... I mean, again, I keep going back to Gabrielle in particular, because as a baby vampire, she was crawling up walls and jumping on carriages and murdering people left and right and doing this, that, and the other. I cannot believe that ancient mummy man couldn't muster up the strength to bust out of a stump. I just, and a couple of Celtic guys, like, come on.
Yeah.
Just whatever. So as far as questions I have going forward, I guess one of my questions is, and I assume at the speed that we're going to find out. Well, I guess it's already kind of explained. Marius just has to go to Egypt, think really hard in the middle of the street, and somehow the vampires will find him, because that's how you do. But how does he transport these two ancient vampires effectively in medieval times or whatever across nations without something going wrong? Or is Anne Rice just going to hand wave that too? I assume she probably will.
Yes.
And
What is the disease?
yeah, that's the new element. That's the new mystery. Now, at the very end of this book, we have to find out. Okay, so yeah, what disease affected Mummy Man?
And
What does
who
it
did it?
do? Yeah, who did it? What does it do to you? How is it cured? I think it's mentioned in there that perhaps if he drinks the blood of an ancient vampire, it will cure him.
Mm-hmm.
Like the blood will be enough to, burn the disease out of him or something. But if that is the cure for all that ails you, then yeah, dude, you're never getting to Egypt as a crispy critter. Like, what were you thinking? Or did you imagine that Marius was just going to like go off and like bring you back a vial of blood? Like, what was your? I mean, did the disease also drive you nuts? Like, you just have absolutely no sense of reality? Maybe I don't know, but anyway, not a great plan. Not a great plan. So unless our mummy man was just such a humanitarian or vampiritarian that he was thinking of the greater good. I must send someone forth to find the cure for this disease before it affects all of our kind. I didn't get that from it either, but I like I say, there's all these little things like if she'd said just this one little thing that the disease like completely weakens you, okay. If she said this one little thing like in my prior stump life, I was a scholar of vampire condition and I want to see that my people are safe and healthy for immortality's sake, and I sacrifice myself by giving you my power that you may cure us all of this oncoming catastrophe. Okay, might have been cheesy, but hey, I'd buy it. Sure, okay, why not? But none of that was there. So
no.
Anyway,
too many questions.
Too many questions. And speaking of which, I'll go to the chat real quick, see if anybody has anything to add. Assassin of the Gray, where they mummify, I have to be watched over by minders and are reanimated with transfusions. What? Am I missing something? Oh, sorry. That was a second part of a thing. I have a vampire story where vampires hibernate to pass time and become mummified. But then I saw exactly that in Underworld. I do not know if I can get this one going. Where they mummify, have to be watched over by minders, and are reanimated with transfusions. Here's the thing. Anything that Underworld has done, they stole from every other vampire story ever. I mean, and especially the World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade. There was actually a lawsuit that White Wolf brought up against the film company for all the similarities of the different factions and clans and vampires versus werewolves and things, except that White Wolf learned that the idea of vampires fighting werewolves, you can go back to Dracula versus the Wolfman, and you can't say that you own that idea. So go for it. Vampires that have to be mummified. Hey, maybe Egyptian mummies were mistaken for royalty, but they were actually vampires. And the pyramids and everything were there to keep them protected until they were ready to rise again. Not to do another Egyptian vampire connection thing, but hey, you could do that too. Nothing stops you. It's all fiction. As long as you don't use any names or terms that somebody else has trademarked, you're pretty much okay when it comes to fiction stories. Let's see. Asan, Elliot, good evening. Lestat ate a baby. Yes. Let us all remember that through all of this, all this romance and adventure and Celts and stump mummies, Lestat ate a baby. And
never forget.
Never forget. And also, any bets on how quickly Lestat departs from Marius after he learns everything Marius has to say because he gets bored with him?
Oh, just when he finished like telling all that he knows, it's gonna be okay. Bye.
Yeah. And not to self-spoil too much, or Marius gets so ticked off that Lestat was the one that Akasha connected with, and he just like takes his ball and goes home. He's like, hell with this, and he just like packs up one night and leaves Lestat, and he's just abandoned.
That was so unfair.
That was hilarious. I mean, God, talk about jealousy, love triangles. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It's like, no, she's my mommy. You can't have her as your mommy. You just got here. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for me. And Mary says no one to blame but himself. He's like, I brought Makasha her new pool boy. Anyway, with that, everyone, I guess we'll wrap up here. So for next week, we are doing chapters 9 through 17 of Ancient Magic, Ancient Mysteries, which will take us all the way up to the last section of the book, the epilogue, which is entitled Interview with the Vampire, which is apparently going to lead us somewhat or connect us more firmly into the events of the first book in some way. Let's see. So programming notes. Again, we'll be here next Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for the next installment of Book Review of the Vampire. And in addition, I know I've said this before, but it's looking like it might actually happen this time. In the very near future, fingers crossed, knock formica, another episode of Living on Borrowed Crime will be forthcoming. I am in talks right now with a true crime content creator to schedule a date, hopefully this coming week. So again, I will say more when I have more things firmly set up. As well, Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern is TED Excellence, where I'll look at off-brand TED Talks. Also, in 10 days, on October 11th, it will be my 7th anniversary on YouTube.
Oh, man.
7 years since I posted my very first video. On that day, I am going to do a TEDx marathon. I don't have a time set up yet exactly, but as soon as I do, I will post it. I'll probably do that in the next couple of days or so to make sure everybody knows ahead of time. I'm looking at maybe 3, maybe 4 TEDx's that I have put aside over time for just such an occasion. Just such an occasion of insanity and education. So look forward to that as well. Anything you'd like to plug, Leonora?
No, not really. See you next Sunday.
Okay, that works. Everyone, let me do one more thing before I go.
Did you say that you're going to be later?
Oh, that's right. Yes, well, I thank you for reminding me. Yes, just after this, in about 15 minutes, a little less now, I'll be on the Midnight's Edge After Dark channel, where Tom Connors and Toxic Man Flu and who else is going to be there? I think Clobberin' Time and Nick Weiser are going to be there. Anyway, a whole bunch of us nerds are going to be talking about our favorite movies to watch for Halloween. So go check out Midnight's Edge After Dark, like right now. Like if you go find the channel right now, I'll be there in about the next 15, 20 minutes. Also, I have a Discord server. There's a link in the chat if you'd like to join the Discord server. All you have to do is click on the link. You'll find yourself on the Say Hello landing channel. And there, in addition to saying hello, you just have to give the secret word. And today's secret word is Mummy Man. All one word. Mm-hmm. Or Stump Mummy. You can say Stump Mummy and I'll know what you're talking about. And then you can join the Discord server, where we talk about all types of things, including true crime and books and the shows and TEDx and all that stuff. So there you go, everybody. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated or shared out the links to the fundraisers at the top of the chat box, excuse me. Thank you guys so much for your generosity. Really do appreciate it. I would also appreciate it if you'd leave a like on the way out. Apparently that helps the algorithm, I'm told. And if you're listening to this in the future or there's a comment you have about the reading or the book so far that I didn't get to, please leave it below and I will respond as I am able. But with that, everyone, have a good rest of your Sunday. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend and the week ahead of you. Leonora, thank you as always for joining me.
Thank you.
Everyone, I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and we will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.